The oars were still there, not washed up on the rocks, not broken, right where someone had placed them, inside a half-swamped boat rocking gently in a small lagoon, positioned as though the person who left them had stepped away for 5 minutes and intended to come back. The boat itself was intact, taking on water, but floating. No markings anywhere on the hull, no name, no registration number, nothing to indicate which ship it had come from, which country had built it, or when it had arrived. 30 yards away, on the rocks above the waterline, sat a 44-gallon steel drum. Beside it, a copper buoyancy tank that someone had hammered completely flat, bent and reshaped, used for something else, then left behind. Around all of it, nothing, no camp, no fire, no rope strung between rocks for shelter, no food scraps, no emergency signal, no message scratched into stone, no footprints leading away from the water, no drag marks in the gravel to show that anyone had hauled the boat up the shore or walked inland. Whatever had happened here left no trace of the people involved. April 2nd, 1964. Lieutenant Commander Alan Crawford stepped off a Royal Navy helicopter and walked through a crowd of aggressive fur seals toward this scene. He conducted a brief search of the surrounding area, found nothing. His team had 45 minutes on the ground. Rock samples, terrain surveys, a site assessment for a proposed weather station. There was no time for more. The helicopter returned. Crawford and his team lifted off. The boat stayed, and the questions stayed with it. In the middle of the South Atlantic, on the most isolated piece of land on Earth, with no shipping lane within 1,000 miles in any direction, how did that boat get here? And what happened to the people who had been inside it? More than 60 years have passed. There is still no official answer. Bouvet Island. If you have never heard of it, there is a reason. This island sits in a place where almost nothing else exists, and it has spent most of recorded history existing at the edge of what people are willing to believe is real. The coordinates are 54 degrees 25 minutes south, 3 degrees 22 minutes east. Those numbers place you in the South Atlantic, below the tip of Africa, south of the Roaring Forties, well into waters that have been ending voyages since the age of sail. But the coordinates alone don't tell you what makes this place unlike anywhere else on the surface of the planet. In 1944, British military advisor and geographic historian Rupert Gould did something simple. He drew a circle around Bouvet Island with a radius of 1,000 miles. The area enclosed by that circle, roughly 8 million square kilometers, contains no other land, not a reef, not a rock at low tide, nothing. Gould noted that no other point on Earth has this property, a 1,000-mile radius containing only ocean, only Bouvet. That is what isolation means here. The nearest land is the uninhabited Princess Astrid coast of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, roughly 1,700 kilometers to the south. The nearest permanent human settlement is Tristan da Cunha, 2,260 kilometers to the northwest, a community of a few hundred people who themselves live at the edge of the habitable world. Cape Town is 2,400 kilometers away. Oslo, the capital of the country that eventually claimed the island, is 12,500 kilometers distant. The island itself covers around 49 square kilometers. 93% of its surface is glacier. It sits on a dormant shield volcano at the southern end of the mid-Atlantic ridge, near a point where 3 tectonic plates meet. Its ice-filled central caldera rises to a high point called Olavtoppen at 780 meters. Its coastline is mostly sheer ice cliffs dropping straight into the Southern Ocean. There is almost nowhere a ship can safely approach, and nowhere a person can easily step ashore. The weather enforces this. From roughly March through October, the island is inaccessible. Permanent storm conditions, sea ice, winds that katabatic flow off the ice dome can push to 200 kilometers per hour. Outside that window, the conditions are merely extreme rather than impossible. Winds below 50 knots are considered favorable. Clear days are measured in hours, not weeks. Fewer than 100 people are estimated to have ever set foot on this island. There is no shipping lane within 1,000 miles. Long-distance maritime routes run far to the north in the productive waters of the Atlantic. Nobody passes through here. Keep that in mind, because it becomes the central problem of everything that follows. January 1st, 1739. The first day of the new year, French naval officer Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier was sailing south through the South Atlantic aboard two vessels, the Aigle and the Marie, searching for Terra Australis, the great southern continent that 18th century geographers had placed on maps despite having no evidence it existed. Bouvet de Lozier was convinced it was out there. He was sailing to prove it. On New Year's Day, he saw something through the fog and the waves. Dark rock, steep cliffs, ice. He couldn't get close. The weather prevented any approach to the shore. He circled what he could see, recorded his observations, and wrote down his position. The position was wrong. His dead reckoning was off by several hundred miles, an understandable error for the period. Sailing without fixed landmarks in currents and wind, but the consequence was severe. The island he had found could not be relocated from his notes. It had effectively ceased to exist. James Cook searched for it during his second voyage in the 1770s, working from Bouvet de Lozier's coordinates. He found nothing. He wrote in his journal that the island probably did not exist. Cook came within perhaps 160 kilometers of the actual island. The fog, the wrong coordinates, and the sheer scale of the search area defeated him. The island was there. Cook was wrong. British whaling captain James Lindsay relocated it in 1808, hundreds of miles from where Bouvet de Lozier had placed it, and named it Lindsay Island. He could not land. In 1822, American sealing captain Benjamin Morel claimed he had put ashore and taken 196 seals. Historians are skeptical. Morel's detailed account of the landing contains no mention of the island's most obvious feature, the permanent ice cap that covers nearly its entire surface. The absence of that detail suggests either an invention or a different location entirely. The historical record here is genuinely ambiguous. In 1825, British Captain George Norris landed, raised a flag, claimed the island for the Crown, and named it Liverpool Island. But Norris also claimed to have spotted a second island nearby, which he named Thompson Island. That island did not exist. Norris's coordinates for the area were significantly wrong. Thompson Island appeared on charts for a century, a phantom standing in for an error of navigation before surveys confirmed there was nothing there. The German research vessel Valdivia arrived in 1898. Her crew could not land either, but they circumnavigated the island and for the first time recorded its position accurately. After 160 years of being lost, the island finally had a correct address. That left one remaining problem. If Britain had claimed it in 1825 and Norway wanted it in the 1920s, whose island was it? In the late 1920s, Norwegian shipping magnate Lars Christensen financed a series of southern expeditions under the name Nyrøysa. December 1st, 1927, the first Nyrøysa expedition under Captain Harold Horntvedt made an extended landing on the island. They stayed for roughly a month, built a small hut they named Villa Harplos, meaning hopeless village, and raised the Norwegian flag, formally claiming the island in the name of King Haakon VII, January 23, 1928. Norway annexed the island by royal decree. Britain objected. The basis of the objection was George Norris's 1825 flag on Liverpool Island, a century-old claim with no continued presence, no accurate maps, and no administrative record, but a claim nonetheless. The problem for Britain was that Norris's charts confused the real island with the non-existent Thompson Island. It was genuinely unclear whether Liverpool Island and Bouvet Island were the same place, or whether Norris had even been where he thought he was. The claim rested on a foundation of navigational errors and a phantom geography. The British Parliament debated the matter on November 19, 1928. Hansard records the session. The government's statement was brief. Britain had decided to waive its claim to Bouvet Island in favour of Norway. A claim, a century old, dissolved in a single parliamentary announcement. Norway made the island a formal dependency in 1930 and a nature reserve in 1971. The Villa Harplos that Horntvedt's team had built did not survive the first winter after they left. The hut and the flagpole were washed away by a storm before the next expedition arrived. The coast keeps nothing. Until 1955, landing anywhere on Bouvet was nearly impossible. Ice cliffs, sheer rock, constant swell. There was no low shore, no beach, no place where a vessel could come alongside and put people onto solid ground with any reasonable expectation of getting them off again. The Norwegian expeditions of 1927 through 1929 had found isolated possibilities at great difficulty. That was the state of things for decades. Then something changed the island's geography. Between 1955 and early 1958, a volcanic event, or possibly a large rock collapse, the cause has not been definitively established, created a new feature on the northwestern coast. A low, flat platform of lava and consolidated debris extending from the shoreline. Researchers named it Nyrøysa, from the Norwegian for new rubble shore. On January 1, 1958, the American icebreaker West Wind documented the platform and recorded its position. It was not present in photographs from 1955. It had formed in the interval. This matters for one specific reason. The lifeboat was found on Nyrøysa. If Nyrøysa did not exist before 1955, the lifeboat could not have arrived before 1955. The window is defined by those two dates, sometime after the platform formed, before April 2, 1964. 9 years. In early 1964, South Africa was assessing Nyrøysa as a site for a weather monitoring station. 2 vessels rendezvoused off the island, the South African supply ship RSA and the Royal Navy Ice Patrol vessel HMS Protector Easter week. The team waited 3 days for the weather to ease. Winds above 50 knots made helicopter operations unsafe. April 2nd, 1964. The window opened. One of Protector's 2 Westland Whirlwind helicopters put a survey team onto Nyrøysa. The team was led by Lieutenant Commander Alan Crawford. Crawford was not a stranger to these waters. He had spent years working in the South Atlantic, meteorological research on Tristan da Cunha, surveys across the region. In 1955, he had visited Bouvet aboard the frigate Transvaal. He knew what the island was like. He knew how fast conditions changed. He stepped off the helicopter onto the new lava shelf. Fur seals converged immediately, large, territorial, charging from multiple directions. Crawford and his team pushed through them across the rocky ground and reached the lagoon. And there was the boat. Crawford described the discovery in his 1982 memoir, Tristan da Cunha and the Roaring Forties. By his account, the boat bore no markings of any kind, nothing indicating its origin, nationality, or the vessel it had come from. On the rocks about 100 yards away sat a 44-gallon drum, a pair of oars, some wooden pieces, and a copper flotation tank that had been hammered out flat. Thinking survivors might have come ashore, they conducted a brief search. They found no human remains. 45 minutes. That was all the time available. Rock samples had to be collected, ground measurements taken, the site evaluated for the weather station. The search could not continue. The helicopter returned. The team lifted off. The boat remained where it was. It was never examined closely, never photographed in any image that has entered the public record, never formally investigated by any maritime authority. Crawford filed his account in a memoir published 18 years later. No press coverage followed the 1964 visit. No inquiry was opened. The boat sat in the lagoon, half full of water, oars in place, and the Southern Ocean continued doing what it always does around Bouvet Island. How did the boat get there? Working through this question requires eliminating possibilities in order. Ocean drift. Lifeboats separate from ships during emergencies and drift for months before washing ashore. This happens. It has happened on remote coastlines before. Could the Nyrøysa boat have arrived this way? Not from before 1955. The platform didn't exist. So the boat would need to have entered the water somewhere in the South Atlantic after 1955 and drifted to this precise point. The nearest shipping lane runs more than 1,000 miles to the north. Bouvet sits outside every recorded maritime traffic corridor. A lifeboat drifting from a casualty on any known route would need to travel in a direction, and for a duration that no current or wind pattern makes straightforward. Then there is the second problem, the missing ship. Historian Mike Dash conducted the most thorough investigation of the Bouvet lifeboat on record, published in 2011. He worked through the standard reference sources for maritime casualties, Hocking's Dictionary of Disasters at Sea, and Hook's Maritime Casualties. These volumes are organized alphabetically by ship name, with no cross-indexing by date or location. Reading them for a specific time and place means going through them page by page. Dash searched the period from early 1963 through April 1964. He found no record of any vessel lost in this region during that window. No SOS transmissions, no search and rescue operations, no crew reported missing. No insurance claim associated with a casualty in the southern South Atlantic that would fit. If a ship had gone down within range of Bouvet and put a lifeboat ashore, some record of that ship's loss would exist somewhere. Maritime casualties of any scale generate documentation, port records, Coast Guard logs, insurance filings, survivor accounts. Nothing exists. Dash evaluated 3 explanations: a genuine shipwreck lifeboat arriving by drift, an empty derelict boat, long separated from its ship, eventually coming to rest on Nyrøysa, or a boat left behind by an unrecorded expedition that had visited the island sometime in those 9 years. The first 2 collapsed under scrutiny. The third held, which meant the question became, who visited Bouvet between 1955 and 1964, didn't record it, and left a boat behind. Moscow, 1960. Transactions of the Oceanographical Institute. Page 129. One paragraph. That paragraph describes the 13th cruise of the Soviet whaling flotilla Slava. Within that flotilla, a vessel designated Slava 9 departed on October 22, 1958, on a combined whaling and scientific reconnaissance mission into the South Atlantic. On November 27, 1958, Slava 9 reached Bouvet Island. A landing party went ashore. Roughly 10 people, sailors and scientists. The goal was a short-duration scientific operation, bird counts, biological samples. One of the scientists was G.A. Solyanik, a researcher at the Odessa Biological Station. Solyanik later published his observations from the Bouvet visit, an ornithological paper that appeared in the Soviet Antarctic Expedition Information Bulletin in 1964. The visit was real. Solyanik was there. What happened next follows a pattern anyone familiar with this part of the ocean will recognize. The weather turned. The storm came in fast. The captain had no choice but to move the ship away from the island. The shore party was stranded. 3 days. On November 29th, 1958, Slava 9's Mil-1MG helicopter returned. It lifted the shore party off the island, one or a few at a time. Everyone was recovered safely. The boat was left on the shore. The fit with the known evidence is close. Nyrøysa came into existence after 1955. The 1958 visit falls inside the window. Helicopter evacuation explains why the boat was intact, but abandoned. The ship couldn't come alongside to recover it, and there was no time or capacity to dismantle and airlift it. The hammered flat copper tank fits a group of people improvising shelter or tools during 3 unplanned days in Antarctic conditions. The absence of markings is consistent with a working vessel's lifeboat left behind, without any expectation that it would matter. But there is a problem with this solution, and it matters. The source chain is thin. The Transactions of the Oceanographical Institute, Moscow, 1960, page 129. No researcher appears to have physically located and read that passage independently. The information surfaced in online discussions among researchers piecing together the Slava 9 hypothesis, attributed to that citation, and has been repeated across secondary sources ever since. What looks like multiple sources confirming the same thing is largely one source being echoed. The pilot, who evacuated the shore party, is named in some accounts as Avrian Rejevsky. That name appears in a reference to a 1972 Moldovan magazine called Kodri. No one has confirmed access to that magazine or verified the account inside it. These documents sit in Soviet-era institutional archives, untranslated, unexamined by anyone who has published their findings. The Slava 9 explanation is the most coherent answer that has been produced for the Bouvet lifeboat. It fits the physical evidence, the timeline, and the known movements of Soviet Antarctic operations in the period, but it has never been officially confirmed. The case has never been formally closed. What presents as a solved mystery is better understood as the most plausible hypothesis built on a documentary foundation that nobody has yet gone back to verify at its source. 2 years after Crawford's visit, a biological survey team came to Nyrøysa and conducted a detailed study of the lagoon where the boat had been found. They documented the lagoon's chemistry, shallow alkaline from decades of seal excreta, fed by meltwater streams covered in algae. They measured and recorded everything. The boat is not mentioned. In 2 years it had gone. The Southern Ocean took it, swamped, washed away in a storm, or pulled under by the erosion that constantly reshapes Nyrøysa's edge. Research shows the platform retreated 50 to 100 meters inland between 1966 and 1979. The shore that exists today is not the shore Crawford walked. The lagoon itself has changed. No subsequent expedition has reported finding it. The island today, an automated weather station rebuilt in 2014 after the 2006 earthquake and winter storm damage destroyed the previous installation. Fur seals, occupying every available stretch of the Nyrøysa shore. Roughly 7,900 individuals counted in 1990, rising to 65,000 by 1997. Holding at that level since, the Norwegian Polar Institute monitors the population on a cycle of expeditions. In February 2023, a team aboard the sailing vessel Marama came to Bouvet for an amateur radio activation, one of the most remote operations ever attempted by the ham radio community. They planned 200,000 contacts. Weather pinned team members outside overnight. Resupply runs were aborted. They logged 18,833 contacts before going off the air. They went home. The island did not notice. Consider what it would take to close this question. Moscow, an institutional archive, a 1960 volume of proceedings from the Oceanographical Institute, page 129 in Russian. Whoever holds that collection, whatever access procedures they require, a researcher with the language skills, the institutional permissions and the specific knowledge of what to look for. Then, the Kodry magazine, Chisinau, 1972, if it still exists in any archive, Arzhevsky's account, if that's what it contains, and if the spelling of the name has been preserved correctly across decades of second-hand citation. Nobody has done this yet. Alan Crawford recorded the discovery in a single paragraph of a memoir published in 1982. He did not pursue the question afterward. It wasn't his investigation to conduct. Whether the boat stayed with him over the following decades, whether he ever learned about the Slava 9 hypothesis, the record doesn't say. Crawford died in 2008. The last person to have seen the boat with his own eyes is gone. Of the roughly 10 people who came ashore from Slava 9 in November 1958, how many are still living? The historical record doesn't say. Did any of them write about those 3 days on the island, a journal entry, a letter home, a later memoir? If they did, where is it? The Soviet institutional culture of the late 1950s would not necessarily have encouraged informal documentation of a whaling fleet's unplanned shore stay on a remote subantarctic island. Maybe nothing was written down. Maybe those 3 days in the storm, the helicopter lifting off Nyrøysa, the boat getting smaller below as the aircraft climbed. Maybe all of that exists only in the memory of people who are no longer here to tell it, in a language most of the people asking the question don't read, in an archive that nobody has thought to open. The weight of this kind of history doesn't come from the answer. It comes from the gap where the answer should be. A boat in a lagoon. Oars placed carefully inside it. A copper tank hammered flat by someone with a reason and a tool. A 44-gallon drum on the rocks. No bodies. No camp. No name. That question still has no clean answer, and maybe the archive that holds it has never been opened. If this kind of history stays with you, Subscribing helps more of it reach you. April 2, 1964. A lagoon on the world's loneliest island. The oars were inside the boat. The drum was on the rocks. Nobody was there. Nobody has ever been found.